Joining me now via Zoom from Russia for an analysis of the lingering war situation is Chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Organization, Godwin Igwe. Thank you for joining us on World Now. Well, there seems to be no end in sight to the Russia-Ukraine war. And in a latest twist, Russia is seeking to conscript residents of the regions of Ukraine that Russia is currently illegally occupying. How do you see that?
First of all, I'd like to say I seek peace because peace is good for everyone, for business, for progress. And I believe that the East and the West add so much utility and value to the world. So, of course, it's very good if they get along. But the question you have asked me is one-sided. You talk only about conscription of Russian, but you fail to talk about the conscription of the Ukrainians that conscript even women, men, even people with terminal diseases like hepatitis and HIV. So the question is too one-sided to answer. But of course, in war, conscription happens, and we can see that conscription happened on both sides. So we should see it as part of the usual characteristics of war and not read any more meaning into it. But of course, I can say, draw some difference that at least Russia isn't conscripting HIV, hepatitis, disabled people, and women to fight the war. Now, concerning what the war is, there's no war between Russia and Ukraine. There's a proxy conflict between Russia and NATO, using Ukraine as the venue or destination for this conflict. And we can see it both in the arms delivery and in the sponsorship of this conflict. And of course, the interests of all the parties in this conflict are different. For Russia, it's clear that it's the safety of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine and ex-Ukrainian territories and stopping the expansion of NATO. For Ukraine, it's more like obedience or loyalty to sponsors, pivot of political elites to West, irrespective of the wish of the citizenry, because the current president ran on the basis of support for peace with Russia. This was his main political slogan, but it changed as soon as he entered power. And of course, they are trying to save as much territory as possible, irrespective of the cost of human lives. This is the interest of Ukraine from what we can see. And for NATO, it's clear that it's expansion of NATO's sphere of influence, political kickbacks from sponsoring wars, increased profit of military-industrial complex, testing new weapons, discarding weapons that are close to the end of their service life, and divesting Europe away from cheap energy resources of Russia. So the first two interests are existential interests, while the third interest is only geopolitical and economical. So what does this mean? It means that Russia and Ukraine are likely to stay in this until they get what they want, while the US will pull out at some point when it's no more becomes economically profitable, geopolitically profitable.
Well, shortly I'll get to asking you what you think that these countries actually want. But then, talking about the conscriptions, I brought that up because these are regions that originally we hear belong to Ukraine, but now have been taken over by Russia, which would then mean that majority of residents in those communities are actually Ukrainians. I want to believe that is the case. So let's get to what you mean by these countries would only end the war when they get what they want. What exactly would you say Ukraine on one hand wants and what Russia on the other hand wants?
Okay, I will start with what you said about the residents in the regions administered by Russia right now, which are part of Russian territory, according to Russian law. These people are predominantly Russian-affiliated, Russian-linked, native Russians, Russian-speaking people who want closer ties to Russia. And because of this reason,
is there like a referendum to that effect? Mr. Ibe, are you saying that there's some sort of referendum to that effect and they've expressed their desire to actually be part of the Russian side?
Yes, there was a referendum. Yes, there was a referendum and they voted to be part of Russia. Now, about a referendum is a legal way of accession into a new state. And meanwhile, we have other examples in the world. For example, Kosovo, there was no referendum, you know, and now they're a new country. We have so many people who also want a referendum, but don't get it, like Catalonia in Spain. So, but I think referendum is the most democratic possible way for people to express their desire to join a state or to secede from a particular state. And a referendum was conducted, and the results are there out in the public. Now, so these people, because of their inherent interest and express desire to be part of Russia, they are definitely willing to fight for their territory and for their interests. Now, I said the first two interests, Russian and Ukrainian interests, are existential interests, fighting for territory or fighting for safety of citizens or fighting for expansion of NATO to their borders. So these are existential, but the interest of US on NATO is not an existential threat. So it's a strictly geopolitical, economical, and expansion of military-industrial complex. So once those conditions are no more sustainable, then obviously we will see them pulling out.
But
and we've
Mr.
seen
Ibe,
political statements
I'm curious.
in that regard.
Okay, don't you think that Ukrainians as a people, should they decide to join NATO, should actually have the free hand to do that without necessarily being stopped or disrupted by their neighbors?
The world doesn't work like that. There's called in the Cuban Missile Crisis, there's something called Monroe Doctrine. The US invented this law. It means that an enemy has no right to have influence or supply military hardware in their neighborhood. And they warned the Soviet Union to go back, and that's when we had the Monroe Doctrine and also the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is an established geopolitical doctrine. There's also the principle of indivisible security, which means in the United UN Security Council, you do not expand your security at the expense of the security of another. So these are well-established doctrines in UN. And these are the principles for which Russia is arguing their position. So you might be on any side, but there's a precedence to this. It's not invented by Russia. It has been occurring. So when one side says, oh no, you cannot practice it, but we have been practicing it, but now you cannot practice it, then it's the height of hypocrisy. So there's nobody who had this. You could say the same as for colonization. When we're colonized in Africa, you say, well, Africans had the right. Well, unfortunately, we had the right to defend ourselves. We had the right to self-actualization and utilization of our natural resources. But we weren't given that because power was mine until we were able to fight for our independence. So nobody gives you your right. And there are laws, there are well-established laws in, or rather, modus operandi in the United Nations. And these are what both sides are arguing for. So if you look at Kosovo, where the Serbians asked what they want, was there a referendum? There was no referendum. What about Iraq? When Iraq was invaded, did you ask the Iraq citizens, well, can we invade you? Please kindly indicate, raise up your hand if you want to be invaded. Nobody was asked. The big geopolitical giants don't play by the rules of maybe our smaller countries. They have their modus operandi, and that's indivisible security, Monroe Doctrine. You should not expand at the expense of another or make your country more secure at the expense of another, and you shouldn't also supply military hardware in the neighborhood of a big geopolitical power.
In the midst of the firepower, the lives of the people is very much important, and we do hope that peace returns to these troubled areas as soon as workable. Godwin Ibe is chairman at Jones and Diaspora Organization, Russia. Thank you so much for talking to us.